My name's David Lebrun, class of '62, born and raised in Los Angeles, lived various places, Mexico, elsewhere, but still live in Los Angeles. I ended up at Verde Valley because my parents knew a family called the Wileys, and Steve Wiley was in class of '61, and my parents heard about it from his parents, and we came and visited the school. And my parents were about to leave for a couple of years. My dad was a painter, and they were going to be at Yale for a year. He was going to be artist in residence, and they were going to be in Italy for a year, and they needed a steady place for me. And I came to visit Verde Valley, and I was like, send me here. I want to be here. I had been, pretty miserable in public junior high school, and I wanted out of there. And this was like, going from hell to heaven. Oh gosh, I can't even really remember that at this point. I remember just coming as I say, coming for a visit, and just seeing the place, seeing the students. I've kind of forgotten. It was a school dance that night, I think, and going as a little junior high school kid, and sort of seeing the group. But I just remember feeling like this was a place I wanted to be. I had being in the country. I'd spent part of my life growing up in a small town in Mexico, and living on the edge of town, and having the wilds around, and I love that. So that part of it appealed to me, and everything about I came from a very lefty family, so the whole notion of being devoted to world culture and world peace and all those aspects of it were totally appealing. Yeah. VBS has had a huge influence on my life. The biggest influence came from the school's focus on anthropology, which I think may have been even stronger when I was there. Joe Brown was a teacher of anthropology. We were required to take anthropology in the freshman year, and that was a hugely influential course for me. He was like a direct line. I mean, he'd lived with Black Elk and written the book about him, and I got so caught up in it, I went out and did a Plains Indian vision quest in my freshman year. Did the best I could, because you're supposed to, starve yourself and go off into the woods, and we had to be in by lights out and show up for meals. So I just skipped meals and tried to keep myself awake at night until I was pretty bleary, and then went up. You were supposed to do a thing where you walk a certain pattern, and do this until their vision comes. So I went up behind the chapel and made myself the pattern in the dirt, and then this bird came and did a dance for me, and I had my vision. So that was my freshman year. But the whole business of the field trips and the anthropology, we would, writing reports on the trips to Mexico. I had already lived in Mexico as a kid, and, so I was already connected there, and going back to Mexico. I ended up, in the course of my life, I became a filmmaker, and in the course of my life as a filmmaker, I've gone back to Mexico, down to Guatemala. That whole part of the world has been very important to me. The whole orientation toward an anthropological view of the world. I went to Reed College and took some courses in anthropology, but basically wanted to see the world find ways of getting inside the ways of seeing of other cultures. And eventually I found film as a way of doing that. And my first film was going back down to Mexico and making a film about 3 ritual systems in Mexico and turning them into a kind of complex experimental film. And since then, a lot of the films that I have done have been one way or another anthropologically related, having to do with history and science and art, but heavily into anthropology. I've worked with a lot of anthropologists on the boards of my films. I get advisory boards that get put together because I'm seeking government grants. So I know a lot of anthropologists and work with a lot of anthropologists, and so that really all came out of Verde Valley. I also should mention that after I graduated from college, I ended up being part of a commune that went off and traveled around the country on buses. So, it came directly out of, going around on buses in Verde Valley to traveling around on painted buses in the late 60s, and it all felt like part of one tradition. And we were also kind of devoted toward, trying to increase world peace and understanding. That was what we were about in our travels in those days. Yeah. But a lot of the films that I've done have been involved with Mexico and Guatemala. Did a film on the decipherment of ancient Maya writing, which took me all over the place. And most recently, the last film I did was shooting in the Petén jungles of Guatemala, a film about Mayan art and the looting of Mayan art. And as I say, working with archaeologists and art historians, anthropologists on the board of the films I'm doing. So I constantly think back to Verde Valley, and sort of really set me on that course. But let me just mention the thing I'm doing right now is so close to the Verde Valley ideal. I think that I'm working on an exhibit. I mentioned I do film, I do animation, and I'm doing something that involves animation of artwork from around the world. It's called the Forms for Worlds, and the idea is to create a museum environment which can be set up in a museum, or it could be set up in a tent anywhere in the world, in which you'll be seeing the art of 4 different world cultures, from the Paleolithic to the Middle Ages, Mesoamerica, ancient to medieval Europe, ancient to Islamic Middle East and Indian Asia, side by side with parallels, and seeing how they relate, how their religions relate across all those cultures, and that this would be something which could, if the great museums of the world are in the capitals of the colonizing powers, like the Americas and Britain and Germany, like the Metropolitan and so this is like a digital portable museum that can go anywhere, in which these objects come to life through animation, in which you're seeing all kinds of connections across world culture. And the work that we're doing, my wife is also a filmmaker. We are traveling to, we've spent a month in India shooting for this. We've been to Tehran. We hope to go back to Iran again. We're, traveling all sorts of unusual places all around the world and photographing and integrating them into this project. So it feels just like a direct continuity from, in every way with what I, got put into me at Verde Valley, sort of trying to give that back. So. I think my favorite places here were getting out. I was going on Easter morning and climbing Napoleon and sitting watching the sunrise, and then maybe Doug Calley would read from the Bhagavad Gita or something like that as we watched the sun come up, or running after school and trying to get the best horse you could. Usually I ended up on Lucky, who was spay-weaned and a painful horse to ride, but heading off bareback down to the creek and having the freedom to do that, that was amazing. Just being the privilege of being in this spot, surrounded by these amazing rock formations, and and the amazing privilege that it's still here. That's so astonishing that it's still that same kind of sacred spot in the middle of this unequaled place in the world. I remember going to town to attend in Sedona, a performance of Under Milk Wood by Dylan Thomas, and sitting next to Max Ernst.
You know, the surrealist painter. He and his wife. He was like, you know, it was this tiny town with crazy artists from all over the world, and this tiny little school. But you know, so that was a special time to be here. But I think it still, you know, retains, you know, the character remark, especially in this spot. I mean, you know, you get into Sedona, it can be kind of crazy, but right here where we are is still a pretty privileged place. Mexico trip to senior year was a political trip to Mexico City. A few of us studying Mexican politics. Spent one year in Guadalajara for Mexico trip. You know, living with a family. 1 year in San Luis Potosí, living with a family. Can't think of 1 year. I think we were near Pátzcuaro. The fourth one I'm kind of blanking at the moment. The Indian trips were really important. I once spent a week living with Thomas and Fermina Banyaka, who were among the elders of the Hopi tribe up on the Hopi Mesas. That was amazing. And later, 30 years later, made a film, or was involved, spent a year working on a film about the Hopi-Navajo land dispute, which was a complex issue. It was a film called Broken Rainbow. It ended up winning the Academy Award, documentary feature, and Thomas and Fermina were part of that film, you know, so 30 years later. Spent one kind of amazing Indian trip living with a Episcopalian missionary to the Navajo who had translated the Bible into Diné, and I helped him build a mortuary, and I was the only one staying with him, and then we would travel around in his Jeep and go visit Hogans and, you know, taking care of sick people on the reservation. That was, you know, amazing. We got a really good relationship going. I'm not a religious person, but I had a really profound experience, you know, with him, and, you know, spending that time with him. Spent one Indian trip working at the Indian school in Loop, Arizona. You know, just being, I think I and Gita Andor, we were assigned to this school for a couple of weeks and working with the kids. Those are the ones that are memorable. There were other trips to Phoenix to study the water project in Phoenix or something, but we didn't have the same emotional resonance. But you know, it was the Mexico trips and the Indian trips that were, you know, really profoundly influential. Process of driving down to Mexico, you know, being in the backs of these trucks built out of plywood, you know, with these bunks, metal bunks in there, co-ed, 20 people, you know, and all this, you know, adolescent steam in the back of a truck with a bunch of pads. It was crazy. And, you know, just the energy of that, you know, knowing that we would pile out at the border, and that part of the mission was, in order to avoid complicated border crossings, the instructions were, when we arrived at the Mexican border, or going either way, the bunk and baggage crew, which I was often part of, which was the people who go throw all we were instructed, everybody was to rush up to the roof, start untying everything, and starting to throw everything, all the sleeping bags and duffels off the top, you know, like we're really eager to have hundreds of pieces of luggage checked, and usually the professionals will come, no, put it all away, we don't want to do that. No. And so, until the one time when they said, yep, open it all up, and some kids had come back from Mexico with various things. You know, they got into big trouble. But, I think, like, you know, knives or something. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, it didn't work one time. But you know, driving down into Mexico, and you know, imagine doing this now, just kind of finding a field, and everybody's like, oh, this looks like a good place to spend the night, and we'd go, you know, dig a fire pit and, you know, set up and, you know, camp by the side of the road anywhere in the wilds of Mexico. And you know, it was, especially when we got down to the tropics. I don't even know if I should talk about this, but when it started going slow and we're driving on the tropic road, kids would open the back of the van and climb up on the roof. But I also remember just, driving into Cottonwood, whatever, being in the back of the trucks and, being in these open flatbed trucks and, hanging over the back of the roof. Just, that feeling of being a kid, driving, traveling at speed, those kinds of things were just thrilling. And I don't know if insurance allows that anymore, but it was wonderful to be a kid here. Yeah. Oh, I probably had to be better socialized. I mean, I came to Verde Valley as a poorly socialized kid, and I didn't know how to make friends, and I was a little overweight, and all those things, and so took me a long time to figure any of that out. I probably would have had some pointers about how to connect better. But no, it was even then it was a pretty forgiving environment for oddballs. It was most of us were unusual in one way or another, and usually there was some sort of clump you could get into, no matter how offbeat you were.